Hey everybody, welcome back to Video. So today we're going to continue the series on MARS FPGA. What is it doing, and when is it going to be here? And it seems like some of the preliminary details from last week have definitely been ironed out. There's definitely been some more information updated on the chipset, what the entire cartridge slot's going to be doing, and a lot more details. We're going to be breaking those all down for you here today to talk about exactly what's happening with MARS, because it seems like now all of the details are finalized, and now the only thing left to be seen is it actually running any sort of cores or hardware, because we're still at the detail and 3D render stage. When I last talked about this, we talked about the redesign of the actual specifications, and there was a tweet that stated that they were going over to a different FPGA chipset entirely, but apparently that was sarcasm. We read what's written on Twitter, and that was not correct, so we're going to be talking about what the team has now said is the finalized design. But you'll see here that it has been reported that this is going to go on sale at the end of summer, and for me at least that is the end of August. Some people think summer is September, but I don't think it is. So what they've done is added an ePhoenix TI-120 FPGA chip to the design, and the last couple times I talked about this, I said I assumed they were going to go with a big and little design, one large FPGA and one small FPGA, and that is in fact what is going on. But it was tweeted that it was going to be a dual FPGA Agilex system. That was not true whatsoever. That was apparently just a bit of sarcasm. But what this chip's going to be doing is handling all of the video processing, as Mike Chi from RetroTink is apparently on the MARS FPGA team. So if you take a look here, the TI-120, it's got 123,000 logic elements, which is slightly larger than the FPGA chip on the Jurassic DE10 Nano that we use for MiSTer. So this is going to be handling video scaling of the cores and of the cartridges. And if you haven't seen my review of the RetroTink 4K yet, I'll leave a link in the description below. It's absolutely outstanding, and Mike Chi has a very big technical wizardry of how to actually scale an image. But this is going to be different than your traditional video scale, and I'll get into that in a little bit in the video. But that scale to 4K off the cores and cartridge slots is going to be coming from that RetroTink side of things. And this dual FPGA design is very similar to what Analogue does with the Analogue Pocket. When we talked a couple months ago about them switching up to a dual FPGA design, I said it was going to be a big and little like Analogue Pocket does, and that's exactly what we're getting, because on the Analogue Pocket side of things, you have two different FPGA chips in there, much smaller than MARS or MiSTer. You have that Altera Cyclone 5 with 49,000 logic elements, and a Cyclone 10 with 15,000 logic elements. So basically the TI-180 is going to be handling the actual cores, the gameplay of things, where the TI-120 is going to be handling the video side of things. So you're going to have what would be presumed to be all 180,000 logic elements of the TI-180 available at your disposal. Now do be aware when I talk about scaling, this is not a video scaler. You're not going to be plugging in analog consoles to the MARS and getting an image out of them. Somebody asked this question and they said no video input. It's probably going to look more like this. You're going to get some of the filters, and you're going to get the scaling technology built in that takes the image up to 4K, but you're not going to be plugging in old consoles. That would be absolutely insane. It would cannibalize Mike Chi's actual customer base for the RetroTink 4K. So you just need to think about this in a little bit of a different manner than an actual video scaler like the RetroTink or the Morph 4K. So you're not going to do something like take your original Dreamcast, plug in a VGA cable to MARS, and then be able to scale that hardware out. I want to be very clear about that, because a lot of people have asked me what that means, and that is what it means. So on the video side of things, as well as probably some of the I/O and low-level operating system issues, you're going to have a separate FPGA for that versus MiSTer, where pretty much the scaler is sitting within the FPGA chip and RAM all on one device. So just a different way to do things, and it does free up some of the resource allocation to make sure you have more logic elements available for games. And you'll see here that we have more renders as well as that cartridge slot on top, and the MARS team and Todd have shown off a lot of different adapters. Now do be aware that the cartridge port on MARS is proprietary, and that makes sense. That's so you don't try to plug it into original hardware and screw something up. And if we take a look at the back I/O, all of that 4K scale on the scaler side of things is definitely coming out of the HDMI. People asked about composite S-Video RGB and component, and they're talking about the fact that there's already a composite jack, and the rest you can get out of the analog multiport, just like we do on MiSTer FPGA. Now, on the game side of things, they are teasing more IGS PGM footage, and this is definitely something. I'll have a video on this and MiSTer coming up soon, but I absolutely love the PGM. It is definitely a hidden gem platform. It's basically a slightly more powerful Neo Geo from Taiwan and IGS that has a ton of amazing games on it, and for some reason or another doesn't seem to get anywhere near as much love as I think it deserves. And this is definitely something that could run on MARS. It could definitely something that could run on MiSTer FPGA. because it is just an upclocked Motorola 68000 with a couple custom IGS chips, nothing too heavy duty. It just happens to have a ton of awesome games. Now on the development side of things, who is working on PGM for Mars? I have absolutely no idea, nothing like that's been stated. Hotego has talked about this in the past for MiSTer FPGA, so it's possible he could be working on it for both platforms, because Hotego definitely does everything on Pocket, MiSTer FPGA, and may very well add Mars in the future. We'll have to just wait and see, but nothing's been announced on that front, so I'm definitely just kind of conjecturing. But as a side note, outside of MARS FPGA, if you've never played the IGS PGM before, this thing is absolutely lousy with some incredible arcade games. I've got an entire series on the hardware as well as the game, so check that playlist out. And Todd here just basically gave the dimensions of Mars, and overall he said it's a pretty small little package. Don't know if he was setting up for a joke there, but I definitely made one in a response to the Twitter because I don't pass up a good small package joke. This channel cannot avoid things like that. But you're basically getting an overall dimension and footprint of what this is going to look like, whether it's on your desk or on your TV stand. So it seems like, at least as far as the physical format is concerned, there is nothing left to the imagination on what the Mars team is planning. Interchangeable SNAC controller ports up front, so you can have the original control ports and the original controllers, whatever cartridge or core you want to use. And we know exactly what that's going to look like. And I will say that the case design is quite nice. I like the two color buttons, definitely kind of aping on the Wonder Mega design language there. You can see a lot of inspiration from a lot of different sources, and again, that cartridge slot on top they've stated is proprietary, and that is a very smart decision because somebody, if it wasn't proprietary, would try to plug it in somewhere. And around the side you'll see that little JAMA port, which we'll get to in just a moment. And people were asking whether or not the cartridges are going to be read from live or if it's just going to dump the contents into a file, and they've stated that it plays straight from the cart. So this isn't something like the Polymega where you're basically just plugging a cartridge in and then a ROM is produced outside of it. This should be reading from the actual cart. And there's a full-size SD card slot on the console as well, definitely better than micro SD. That format definitely does drive me nuts. My cameras use this format, and as good as micro SD is, you end up just kind of losing those cards every once in a while. Now I'm very still curious about the JAMA slot because you do see that little port there, and if you're not familiar with what JAMA is, it's an arcade standard to connect hardware into an arcade cabinet. This is a super gun. It's got a female JAMA connector on one end, and it doesn't seem like this is what Mars is doing whatsoever, so I'm assuming they're making a custom cable for JAMA. Probably still has the same amount of pins, but in a much smaller package, or it may actually reduce down some of the pins. It might take some power out or some other inputs that can go through Mars, and it might be sort of a video and audio connector that leads out to a JAMA header. It's going to be interesting to see how that works, but with a console design, putting this in an arcade cabinet seems like less of the intention than something like MiSTer FPGA with the MiSTer JAMA connectors that we have on the market. But of course, JAMA is a fun standard. It's what a lot of people use, obviously, so it will be interesting to see exactly what the Mars team is going to do with that. And they're again stating that it should be completed by June and be available for sale by the end of summer. But again, they stated in a previous tweet that originally this was going to be showcasing running on real hardware at too many games, but at this point in time they've also announced that that's not going to be happening. They're going to be talking about FPGA development on a panel, but the hardware is not going to be available to show at that point in time. So basically everything about Mars is here. We have all the details, we have the case designs, all of the different connectors, all of the different cartridge adapters. The only thing we wait to see is this actually running games, cartridge as well as ROMs on the hardware. Once that actually happens, I'll definitely talk about it on the channel, and you know, one way or another I'll definitely be reviewing a Mars FPGA device when it's available. Be sure that if you have any questions or comments, so leave them down below. It seems like things are basically solidified on the detail front, and now we just gotta wait to see it tested on real hardware. Be sure that, have a great weekend, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.